Hey everyone, right now across the US Virgin Islands, there are a bunch of key events happening that are really putting public trust to the test. We're talking about everything from the courtroom to the legislature. So we're going to connect the dots on the stories shaping the community as we speak. This is a DGHradio.com news and information United States Virgin Islands news review. Okay, so we're tracking a few big developing stories, and they all seem to boil down to the same basic question. How do we actually build a more accountable and, a more resilient future for the islands? All right, here's what we've got on top. First up, we'll dive into accountability. Then we'll hit policy debates, some big environmental challenges, and the state of our public services. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at what it takes to build a more resilient future. So let's kick things off with accountability. Right now, there are two really different legal cases that are forcing everyone to take a hard look at the integrity of our institutions and, of course, the officials who are running them. First, a really major story here. Former at-large Senator Stephen Payne has been convicted in Florida of sexual battery involving a minor. Now, this comes after he was already expelled from the VI legislature, and he's currently awaiting sentencing. But look, the crucial point here goes way beyond just the verdict. This whole case has reignited a really tough but absolutely necessary conversation. Things like, how are we vetting our public officials? How are we safeguarding our youth and most vulnerable? And the big one, how can the community possibly start to rebuild trust when it's been so deeply broken? And that whole theme of trust in our institutions, it carries right over to the election process itself. Take the Ida Smith election case. It's just been transferred to St. Thomas. Now, yeah, that's a procedural step, but you better believe it's being watched closely, because every single decision like this impacts public confidence that our election systems are actually fair and transparent. Okay, so this focus on procedure and making sure the public has a voice, well, it leads us right into our next topic, policy that's really at a crossroads. And we're seeing this play out in real time, especially with some key education bills that have been put on pause for a closer look. So why the pause? Well, let's break it down. You've got a bill for a daily pledge that was held up because of constitutional concerns. Then there's the proposal to lower the kindergarten age from 5 to 4, but people raise questions about, developmental readiness and if the classrooms could even handle it. Even a straightforward plan for morning PE got sent back for more work. In every single one of these cases, lawmakers are basically hitting the brakes, which really signals they want more community feedback before they make any big moves. All right, let's shift gears a bit. We're going to talk about a classic tension here in the islands, that constant push and pull between development on one side and preservation on the other. And a perfect example of this is the whole debate over rezoning 15 acres at Beeston Hill on St. Croix. On one hand, the folks for it see the potential for new jobs, new services, which sounds great. But on the other hand, opponents are raising some pretty serious concerns about traffic, drainage, and what this could do to the open space and the whole character of the neighborhood. And just in, we have a new development on this. The territory's own planners have weighed in, and they've officially recommended that lawmakers reject the rezone. They're citing those exact concerns we just talked about, land use consistency and environmental impact. But the final call, that still rests with the legislature. And this isn't just happening at Beeston Hill. This same kind of tension is playing out all over. Over in St. John, a settlement in a legal battle that's been going on for years could finally clear the way for the Summer's End Marina project. But then, at the very same time on St. Croix, you've got a pollution advisory for Prosperity Beach because of high bacteria levels. It's a really stark reminder of the immediate environmental health challenges we're facing. So, we've talked about the environment we live in. Now let's talk about the services we rely on every single day. We're going to look at our utilities and our schools because guess what? Those same big themes of trust and transparency are front and center here too. And this question right here, it gets right to the heart of a huge controversy involving the Water and Power Authority, or as we all know it, WAPA. This whole thing really came to a head in a pretty high-profile dispute. The former owner of the St. Croix Avis says she was getting billed for massive amounts of electricity at a facility that was completely shut down. Phantom usage, she called it. And her story? Well, it's become a symbol for the frustration that so many residents feel about WAPA's billing accuracy. So, what's WAPA saying? Well, their leadership has come out and acknowledged that there are serious billing errors. They say corrective steps are underway and that they're working on a bigger plan to modernize their metering and customer systems. The goal they've stated is pretty clear: rebuild public trust by getting more accurate and providing better service. Now, shifting from utilities to education, there's actually a really positive step toward more transparency. The Department of Education has just released updated public school report cards. What this does is give families clear, easy to understand data on everything from academic growth to graduation rates. The idea is to empower them to be better, more effective partners in their kids' education. You know, when you look at all these issues together, accountability, policy, our public services, they all point to a much bigger question. How is the territory actually building a more resilient future? So for our last section, let's look at how the islands are preparing for the challenges of tomorrow. Everything from climate change to preserving our culture. And there's a fantastic example of this taking shape right now on the Christiansted waterfront. It's a project that's all about a historic building, but it has a really forward-thinking vision. Okay, so the plan here is really cool and has a few different layers. First, they're going to restore the historic Alexander Theater and bring it back to life as a performing arts center. But at the same time, they're retrofitting the whole structure to meet FEMA safe room standards so it can withstand major storms. So what do you get? A resilient hub that's a cultural center in good times and a life-saving community shelter when a hurricane hits. I mean, it's just a perfect blend of culture and safety. So when you step back and look at all of these stories we've talked about, from the courtroom to the legislature, all the way to WAPA's billing department, there's one single thread that connects them all. And that thread is trust. And that quote says it all, right? Trust isn't just some vague feeling. It's something that's built on timely facts and consistent follow-through. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. If trust and transparency are the absolute foundation for making progress, whether it's in our leadership, our policies, or our public services, then the critical question for every single resident and every leader is the same. What's the next step? What's the most important thing we can do to build it?